Hello and welcome to the Amplitude e-commerce webcast, where we talk about all things that make e-commerce better, more profitable, and more safe. And today I'm excited to have with me here my friend, Cesar Resendez. I'm not going to say my old friend, my young friend. Cesar is Director of Global Digital Marketing Operations for Experian here in Los Angeles, California. How are you, Cesar?
I'm good. How are you doing, Doug?
Great to see you. Cesar is a key player in Experian's global digital roadmap and its marketing technology platforms. Key areas like content strategy, conversion rate optimization, web analytics, and search marketing, both pay-per-click and SEO. So it's indeed an honor, sir, to have you here with me today.
Oh, the honor is all mine. Thanks for having me.
Obviously right now we're in a period of great uncertainty. There's no forward view, budgets under pressure, customers under financial pressure. In other words, this is a crisis period. Hopefully this crisis will be over soon, but there will be other crises too. So I want to talk about priorities in a crisis. Every dollar that people are spending now online is much more precious than it's ever been. And competition is very fierce. It was before the crisis, and now crisis period with people are really under pressure, it's twice as much. So if you're an advertiser, you're trying to decide how to prioritize media mix between paid and organic media strategies and a whole host of things you might potentially be doing with your marketing budget. So that's why I'm really eager to get your thoughts on this today, Cesar, though I know this is a tough topic. There's no softball questions around this. So I appreciate your just being willing to dive into it with me. Audience members are CMOs, and they're likely already believers in the power of SEO to drive sales. But during a crisis time, is SEO really truly vital at this time, for e-commerce? And, is it conceivably a strategy you could just turn off for a few months and restart?
Yeah, well, I don't think SEO is ever something that you want to turn off. That you flip a switch and say, "Hey, I'm going to put it into cruise control here for a while." And the reason I say that is because it's really something fundamental that's essential to, I think, any business that has a presence online. It's sort of like keeping. If you think of an analogy of if your e-commerce business, thinking of it as a physical store, it would be sort of like, keeping the front door closed and then people can't get into the store. So I know it's tempting during these times. Obviously, everyone has to really evaluate their budgets during this crisis, or most businesses, I would say, are in a situation right now where they really have to keep an eye on the bottom line and see where they might be able to cut costs. And that's certainly completely understandable. But I think that when it comes to SEO and just search in general, it's such a key source of traffic and revenue for businesses that I don't think it's something you want to say, okay, well, I'm gonna shut this off now and hope things turn out okay, because you can end up in situations, especially during times like this, where you might be facing a situation where there's a surge in traffic. You may have unexpected issues affecting what pages on your website are showing up in search results. All kinds of things can arise that if you're not paying attention can be pretty detrimental.
I can imagine. I'm hearing a lot from our clients right now about this sort of priorities issue. They're thinking like, what can we do to kind of keep our lights on in every area? If we're having that conversation about SEO and assuming that marketing budgets are as tight as they can be and everybody's having to walk into their CEO right now and justify what they're spending, what would be the short list of SEO items that really have to be done right, both in the sense of defensively and maybe just opportunistically when your competitors may be falling down themselves?
Yeah, I think some of the key things are the key things that are always true for search marketing and for SEO in particular. Your indexation is always absolutely something that you need to keep an eye on. And by that, I mean, can the search engines reach and find the content and then index them? In other words, include the content in their results. So that's something that you never want to take your eyes off of. If you don't pay attention to that on a regular basis, you can end up in situations where there's a direct effect to your bottom line, to your revenue, right? If users can't reach your site through search engines, that's a pretty big problem. So I would say that's always going to be pretty near the top of my list. And another one would be, so with everything going on right now, there's really, I would say we're right before our eyes, we're seeing a massive shift in the way that people behave online, not just online, but in general, obviously, but for marketers, for digital marketers, and for CMOs and anyone that's in a marketing position, I think you really have to consider what these changes mean to your business. And like I said, it's a pretty massive shift we're living through right now. They're shopping different, they're buying differently. They are even things that you wouldn't expect, like the way they're perhaps spending their leisure time. All those things are changing really excuse me. And then the assumption often is that, hey, things are going to go back to normal, so we don't have to worry. We're going to get through this in a couple of months. But I think what a lot of people miss is a lot of people talk about the new normal, and that is very much what is happening. I think in the digital space for sure. Some things will perhaps change or shift in a different direction or go somewhat back to normal. But a lot of these are really actually permanent changes that we're undergoing.
Yes.
And so when you tie that back to SEO, you could be seeing things like a massive shift in the type of products that you're selling that you need to be paying attention to. There could be patterns on which pages are being visited or what users are looking for about your company, about your brand. And those are all the kind of things that you would normally work with, let's say, a digital or SEO agency to understand what's driving the search traffic. What are the things that people are searching for about your business? Has that changed? And then on a more practical level, obviously, you want to make sure your site is up and running. Some people are experiencing very high levels of traffic surges. You obviously want to make sure that everything's functioning correctly, that the site's loading properly.
Yeah, what's something that comes up a lot, and I see bandied about quite a bit, is the issue of site speed. And it is interesting for some of our clients right now, it's a ghost town with their customers, and others they're seeing surges to the point where they can't meet fulfillment. What might be some of the more common fails, focus, attention, or strategy during a time like this? Because everybody's running around, like nobody has a lot of forward strategy, but also you're trying to keep your long-term priorities just moving along. What would be some common fails that you kind of see during times like this?
In some cases, there's been a shift in what people are looking for, the types of things that may be more important to them at this time, and not being aware of those, not being able to respond to those could be pretty significant. And the other one that I think is a great opportunity, and it's related to search, but you can maybe think of it a little bit separately in most cases, which is user experience. So to me, that's one of the biggest fails. Call it a fail, but I call it oftentimes a missed opportunity. So when you think about the way websites are designed and built today, in most cases, people are buying, let's say, whether it be a WordPress or a Shopify site. Oftentimes, in most popular content management systems, they come with themes and templates that are sort of pre-wired, you could say, and off the shelf. Yes. And then people will customize them a little bit, but oftentimes they really won't customize them that much. And that's really not necessarily the best way to build a website. User-centered design is a very much, very valuable, I would say, in terms of your approach to how you build your site. And when you're working with, like I said, templates or themes, that design process probably was not baked in, that user-centered design process. So it's then becomes incumbent on you as the business owner to engage in proper UX research, a proper UX process to build an experience that's first class for your users. And the way that ties back to search is that UX has and the experience of the user on your site in general is becoming over time a much bigger and bigger ranking factor. And in the past, Google was somewhat coy about it. There were some indirect information, I would say, in terms of, or responses from Google in terms of what role it plays. But more and more, it's just front and center. Google recently announced themselves that their user experience is now going to be pretty much a direct factor into the ranking. So if you think of it that way, it's like a double win, right? Because you build a great experience for your users, for your customers. That brings them back, gives you more repeat customers. It gives you more initial customers, lower bounce rate. The list goes on. But at the same time, you're also, in the eyes of search engines, you're a better source for information. And then therefore, they're going to rank you a little bit higher.
Coming back to the speed question for an instant, I apologize, if this really is something, as I know as a ranking factor, it's somewhat controversial. Again, there's no easy questions in this interview. We do hear from our clients occasionally. They come to us because somebody said their website is too slow. And it could be something they're using some sort of tool on the internet. It could be something they're viewing from a user standpoint, as you mentioned, can be very important. But in a crisis time when budgets are under pressure, people may be getting a lot of extra website traffic. They may not not get normally. And so there's a question of, is it worth spending to try to speed up your website in this time? And so I know there's probably not a magic answer, but how slow is too slow to annoy Google as opposed to annoying your customers?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as you said, there is no magic number that I can give you and say that, hey, if your site loads in X amount of seconds, you're going to be all great and Google's going to love you and put you in the number one position. And as I'm sure you know, Duff, it doesn't really work that way anyway. So it's really one of many ranking factors. But I would say that it's definitely worth paying attention to, both from an SEO standpoint and just in terms of the experience you're providing your users, right? If you get to a site, things are not loading properly, things are loading kind of slow, you're sitting there lagging. People are definitely impatient, as we all know, online, especially. That 1 second where your site is taking can be the second that the user decides to just leave your site and go somewhere else to one of your competitors. So it's definitely worth paying attention to. I personally wouldn't think I'd look at it strictly from an SEO standpoint. I think I would be looking at it more from the perspective of my users and looking at it that way. And there are definitely a lot of tools out there, a lot of standards out there that you can find, for the people that are managing your website and, without getting into the weeds on a lot of the different ways of optimizing your site for speed. I would say it is worth pursuing, but you want to make sure you're not looking at it strictly from an SEO standpoint, like I said earlier.
Let's hit another subject that's kind of tricky. See how you handle this one. And when you're thinking about how to manage a media mix, I know your expertise stretches across a lot of different disciplines in marketing. How would you defend an SEO budget in a time of crisis like this? And just in general, again, there's not a magic number or anything. How would you begin to think about the factors that would measure how much you'd want to spend or how much resource energy you'd want to spend right now as opposed to paid search or email or other things?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to be honest, it's a pretty difficult question. I think a lot of marketing leaders struggle with this one. It's like, how do you put a number on the value of SEO? It can be pretty complicated. It gets a little murky because SEO is one of many different channels. There's, if you study your marketing attribution, you'll see that there's an interplay there. So it's oftentimes difficult to just put one concrete number on how much your SEO traffic is worth. So I think that's probably oftentimes not necessarily the best way of going about it. The way I look at it is you want to start with the big picture, which is what are your goals? If you have an annual budget, I would want to look at what are my goals for the year in the search channel. How much traffic am I looking to drive? How much revenue am I interested in driving or expanding? Whether it be, hey, I want to grow my SEO traffic this year by 30%, for example. And with that in mind, at the same time, also looking at the opportunities that are out there, because how big is that pie that you're going after? Is it a huge opportunity? Is it already, are you pretty much already, maxed out on what you can accomplish? Obviously, the more opportunities that are out there, that also would influence that decision to invest more. And then how competitive is the industry? There's some industries that are extremely competitive where you almost need millions of dollars to play in that industry. And so in that scenario, obviously, depending on how competitive that industry is, would potentially limit you. But once you have your goals in mind, I think that's a good way of going about it. You work backwards from there. If your goals are to increase SEO traffic by 30% or SEO revenue by 20% or whatever it is, then you have to work backwards from there and say, okay, what is it going to take to make that happen? What is my strategy? What is my plan to achieve that? And then how much is that going to cost me? That's something usually you would want to partner with your digital or your search agency with to come up with a good plan to achieve those goals. And then from there, you start to see the numbers kind of start adding up and the numbers will sort of work themselves out. But at least it gives you a more, you could say, strategic way of coming up with that budget. Because oftentimes what I find is people just sort of pull the number out of thin air or just it's just based on whatever they may have that's maybe left over from their overall marketing budget, which I definitely don't recommend that as the way to set your SEO budget.
Certainly not. I'm just dying to ask you this. What would you recommend as like some favorite websites that a CMO would we just want to glance at least once a week to stay on top of kind of digital marketing without necessarily getting too deeply in the weeds?
Yeah, sure. I can give you a couple of recommendations. I think the first thing I would say is for digital marketing or just marketing leaders and CMOs would be wary of the information that you find often on the typical CMO type of websites or publications. I think oftentimes those are written by people that don't have deep expertise in
marketing
digital
pieces.
or in search. Yeah. I've read a lot of articles that really kind of raise your eyebrows, and obviously from people that probably had no business writing the article. So I would be wary of I would be wary of content from some of those sources. I'm not saying it's always bad, but in a lot of cases, like I said, they're not subject matter experts that are writing them. And then as a CMO, obviously you're not really gonna, because I could give you a list of 5, 6 search marketing types of websites, but I think in most cases, as try to learn SEO per se, you don't really need to know every little update that Google has made necessarily. It's more about staying in tune with the big shifts, the changes in the search industry, and so for me, I think something like Search Engine Land is a great all around website. Kind of gives you a lot of news about just what's going on in the industry, things that you need to keep up on. Outside of that, I think, to be honest, that's probably you don't really need too much more than that. But I would also recommend following it's Google Webmasters, which whether you follow them like on Twitter, I'm not sure what other channels they're available on. I don't think you'd want to follow them on Instagram, but certainly on Twitter, that's something that I follow, and just to keep up with what's going on with the updates. Some of them are a little bit more detailed, maybe more than you might need to know, but other times they're very impactful things that they do announce on, even at a C-level you'd want to be aware of.
Very cool advice. I'm going to be definitely checking that more than once a week. Before you go, just want to give our listeners an opportunity to learn more about you or get in touch potentially with you. Would LinkedIn perhaps be the best way to get with you, or how would be the best way to reach out to you?
Twitter, I'm at Cesar Resendez on Twitter, and then also on LinkedIn. You just searching my name and you could find me pretty easily.
That sounds good, and I'll add those links as well here. Thanks again, Cesar, for your time today. So everyone, please stay in touch at amplitudeagency.com and stay tuned for more episodes of the Amplitude Digital e-commerce podcast soon. Thanks again, Cesar.
Thank you, sir.